meets West. A very good morning to you. This is today's Business Europe, live from Istanbul, where it's now 8 o'clock in the morning. We're focusing down on the financial opportunities you might see in Turkey. Obviously, it is now 6 o'clock in Central Europe. I beg your pardon, 7 o'clock in Central Europe. Good afternoon if you're joining us live in Asia. Thank you very much for switching us on. Our main headline on today's Business Europe actually emanates from the United Kingdom. For the first time ever, the Labour Party there, the Socialist Party, has won a second term in the UK election. It's very much the morning after the night before. Within the last few minutes, Prime Minister Tony Blair has given his victory speech. Intel has cheered the markets in the United States. We've got the US futures trading higher and a good performance over in Asia after Intel sticks to its projections, though admittedly we're coming through towards the lower end of them. More on that in a few moments' time. And in Washington, pressure to bear from the Europeans. The United States is coming under further pressure. The administration of George W. Bush, this time from the EU Trade Commissioner Pascal Lamy, as it attempts to protect US steel workers from our exports.
Good morning, everybody. Back here in London, it could be an interesting day for the FTSE 100. The market closed yesterday at 5948. And it is predicted that today could see it go through the momentous 6,000 barrier that the market has been bouncing off for so long. If it does, it'll be a key day, a red letter day for the FTSE 100. It's been trying to break through this barrier for absolutely ages. Simon, back to you.
Thank you very much. Guy Johnson over in London. And London is obviously the focus of our top story today with that victory. And indeed a victory speech now from Tony Blair, 2,600 miles away from us, but nonetheless a victorious man this morning. The government winning its second term and the Labour Party winning its second term for the first time ever. Sean Walsh is in the heart of the political centre in London, Westminster. He joins us now live. What are the scores on the door, Sean, as far as the MPs are concerned? What have they won?
Well, thank you very much indeed, Simon. Yes, it's a beautiful morning here in central London. And you can see the sun shining over the Palace of Westminster behind me and very much shining on the Labour Party here. Just across the water, Tony Blair has been addressing the Labour Party faithful, thanking party workers for their efforts during this campaign. He described it as a night of history, and he said that now is the time to deliver on their election promises. Now it's time to return to the man with the fez, our answer to Tommy Cooper in Istanbul. Simon.
Sean, thank you very much. Sean Walsh, who's very much plugged into the political activity in London on our top story this Friday morning. Overnight, as the results were being counted as they came in, our man in Singapore was talking to the analysts. He was watching the markets and, of course, he was watching sterling. Ben Pedley joins us live from the Dow Jones Newswire, our regular market watcher on today's Business Europe. Ben, what are they saying?
Well, Simon, it was a very interesting evening of foreign exchange trade, both yesterday evening and moving into today's session, because what we saw overnight was sterling hitting a 15-year low against the US dollar. That's about it on the currency front. I will hand back to you, Simon, in sunny Istanbul with that wonderful view behind you.
Ben, thank you very much. Ben Pedley over in Singapore. Let's just focus back on the equity market. It's going to be a good session, it looks like, for technology stocks. One of our main stories, of course, is the Intel story. Confirmation in this 11:30 conference call that they had with analysts last night that sales in the second quarter will be within the previous range of expectations for the world's largest semiconductor maker, albeit at the low end. And obviously that's boosted, again, hopes of a recovery within the semiconductor centre. We've already run you through, of course, what was happening on the foreign exchange markets. The euro, if we just have one quick look at the euro in the wake of Wim Dousenberg's inaction at the European Central Bank yesterday, though he did signal, of course, that they might actually intervene to support the currency to try and hedge off inflation. We'll look at the euro a little bit later on. Up after the break, we've got to pay some bills. It's a very expensive setup to be live from Istanbul. After the break, we're going to analyse the situation here in Turkey. Where can you make money from a country that is obviously a huge strategic asset? Stay with us. 11 minutes past 8 over here in Istanbul. Good morning. Thank you for switching us on. Today's Business Europe live from Turkey. Our top story emanates from London, 2,600 miles away. Tony Blair has won his second term of office, and the first time ever that the Labour Party has won a second term of office. Down at number 3, our third headline today, the United States coming under increasing pressure from EU politicians over their attempt to support the steel market locally and allege steel dumping. Guy Johnson is with us over in London with some analysis. Guy, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. 2,600 miles back here. We're talking very much about what's happening in the semiconductor sector. Yesterday, a huge day in the United States. We had a mid-quarter update from Intel after the close yesterday. The market took it positively, what they had to say for themselves. This is where Intel closed up 4.4%. It then put an extra bit on top of that. OK, 2,600 miles away, or near as damn it, Simon Hobbs is sitting overlooking the Bosphorus, or at least it's behind him. Simon, over to you. Indeed
I am, and it's absolutely gorgeous, Guy. Thank you very much. Guy Johnson over in London. We are here because world investors are gathering to try and work out at a conference which is being sponsored by one of our affiliate stations, whether there is serious money to be made here, and to feed back advice to some of the key players on as to how they can deal with the present situation. I mean, many investors would say to you the only time that you should really get into an emerging market is when it's facing a financial crisis, and it is quite clear that Turkey is in the midst of that at the moment. The last 100 days have tested the political and economic establishment to the limit. The latest market catastrophe was sparked by a public row between the Prime Minister and President over tackling corruption. As interest rates soared on February the 22nd to 4 digits, Ankara was forced to float the lira. It's since lost 40% of its value against the dollar. Kemal Dervish says the economy will contract by 3% this year. The Tuzaid Business Association thinks the contraction will be far nearer to 6%. Well, obviously that's going to be the subject of today's conference, at which we're expecting 2,000 invited guests from around Turkey. Satellite links going everywhere over to the United States, London, wherever. Amongst those that have flown in for the conferences, we have Erda Gersek. Actually, yes, Erda Gersek's based in London. He is from Citigroup Asset Management. And Peter Garber has flown in from New York, where he works for Deutsche Bank. Let me kick off with you first of all, Erda. I mean, do you think that people watching you now can actually make money out of the present situation?
Yes, Simon. The markets will likely to remain volatile in the near term. And that's because investors are actually reacting to the news here rather than anticipating them.
Erda, if you could give one piece of advice to people watching, what would it be?
Watch political stability and adherence to the IMF program. They have done a great job so far. If the reform momentum goes through, real interest rates will fall, and that dynamics is going to work out.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us both. Erda Gersek from Citigroup Asset Management in London, and Peter Garber, who's flown here from Deutsche Bank in New York. You're watching Today's Business Europe, live from Istanbul, where we're trying to work out if you can make money from the situation here. Meanwhile, over in the United Kingdom, Tony Blair has won a stomping victory. Live to London in a moment. Kilometres from Berlin. This is Today's Business Europe, live from Istanbul. Good morning, thank you for joining us. It is now 8:30 here, 7:30 in Central Europe, and 6:30 in the United Kingdom, where it is the morning after the night before. Indeed, Tony Blair has won a second term of office, and he's done it with a landslide victory. The questions now, of course, all point to whether you're going to get the pound coming into the single currency. It's a long process, but it's a process that appears to have now started. So, Tony Blair has overnight won the UK election. It's become clear the latest count we have is 411 MPs going to Labour, whereas you've only got 159 to the main opposition, the Tory party. Tony Blair has made his election speech. Gordon Brown has said, the UK Finance Minister has said that nothing has changed on the UK's policy towards entry to the single currency, but obviously that's got to be one of the main focuses. Let's go back to Guy over in London, 2,600 miles away. Guy, you have some analysis for us, I understand, on this important story for Europe.
Yeah, it is certainly a very important story for Europe, and I think what we should do is actually get over to Jeremy Batstone. He's the head of research at NatWest Stockbrokers, to get some sort of feel and understanding of what we can be expecting from the UK now that we've got this election victory through. Jeremy, will business in the UK today be waking up with a smile on its face, or a little bit of concern spreading now?
I think that there will be some concern. The obvious concern, I suppose, is that whilst the result as it stands appears to give a very strong mandate for continuation of the policy towards a referendum on closer integration with the continent of Europe, the real problem I think that the politicians are going to have to confront is the fact that in order to achieve the kind of vote that the Labour Party managed yesterday, they had to really provide voters with considerable amount of confidence. And of course, with unemployment at a 30-year low and inflation at very low ebb as well, there is no reason at the moment for the electorate in the UK to really vote against the status quo. And that is the problem that I think Tony Blair and other Labour Party strategists will have when they try to assess exactly when to hold a referendum on closer European integration.
Jeremy, thanks very much for being with us. Jeremy Batstone joining us high above the Palace of Westminster. He's from NatWest Stockbrokers, talking about what we can expect for the business community as a result of that UK victory for the Labour Party. Obviously, that is the big news here in Europe at the moment. Plenty more to talk about, though, in Turkey. Let's get right now back to Istanbul, where Simon is sitting pretty.
Thank you very much. Guy Johnson over in London. Actually, one more that we ought to mention before we focus down on events in Turkey is the situation with the steel industry. Overnight, President George W. Bush's decision to seek possible new import restrictions to help the steel industry, as of course you have the Senate turning over to Democratic control, has come under some heavy criticism from outside and indeed inside the United States. The EU Trade Commissioner Pascal Lamy has said that the US's attempt to force trade negotiations on steel imports with the threat, obviously, of restrictions was not the right approach. He adds that the EU will fight any attempt by Mr. Bush to impose new import restrictions. The EU has, of course, already warned that it would take up the matter with the World Trade Organization, which is interesting. Right, let's get a look ahead at what we can expect from London trade today. One of our news watchers on today's Business Europe. We have them in Frankfurt, we have them in Paris, we have them in Copenhagen, and we have a host of them in London. Amongst them, Steve Sedgwick. Over to you, Steve. Good morning.
Morning, Simon. Yeah, of course, the one issue dominating everything in the UK this morning is the general election. We have got very slim news flow corporately coming out of the UK today, so really that will command centre stage general election. A couple of points. First thing, we have got the spread betters early calling the FTSE up around 30 points, around 0.5%, around the 59.80 level. So it does look like another potential charge at the 6,000 level may be on the cards. I tend to disagree slightly with what Jeremy was saying as far as the medium-term outlook for the FTSE on the back of a general election. The fact is the city likes continuity, it likes the uncertainty out of the way, and that's what it's got. It's got pretty much the same government, constitution, majority in Parliament as it had yesterday, the day before. So pretty much there is going to be huge continuity in the Labour policy. We are expecting a slightly positive theme to the market this morning. Simon.
Turn yourself off. Oh, hi. Thank you very much, Stephen. Stephen Sedgwick over in London. Thank you very much. Let's just take a break. Let's pay some bills. I think that's probably the best thing. We will regroup. After that, we will talk to Ersin Ozince, who is from the main Turkish business organisation here and the CEO of Istbank. We are live from Istanbul on today's Business Europe. Good morning. We are 16 minutes away from a very important conference here in Istanbul, the start of a day under which some of the key players in Turkey will meet some of the key academics and indeed some of the key investors from around the world to try and not only sort through the problems that Turkey has at the moment, but also to find out where they can make money. We'll talk about that in a few moments' time. But first, our main stories this Friday morning on today's Business Europe. In the United Kingdom, Tony Blair has given his election victory speech, a landslide victory. The talk is, of course, of whether or not the pound will near-term go into the single currency or not. The third party, the Liberal Democrats, which supports entry, has also had a very good showing. The opposition has been grubbed. Let's get some more of the business stories this morning. Over to Guy Johnson in London. Guy.
Yeah, thanks very much, Simon. Plenty going on over here in Europe in terms of details coming out this morning. We've got some stories coming through. BT is certainly one that's going to be a big focus today for the UK markets. The UK markets today very much poised, we think, possibly to go through the 6,000 mark. BT currently trading 421. It was down 1.6 yesterday. And show you where we stand on the session yesterday. How close can we get to that 6,000 mark? Are we going to flirt with it, or are we going to go through it today? Simon, back to you. 2,600 miles away in Turkey.
Thank you very much. I know it's going to be a standing joking squawk box. I can feel it coming. And no, there will not be any wearing of fezzes, and there will not be any wearing of pointed shoes either. Thank you very much for the suggestions that you've emailed through overnight. Guy Johnson in London. Let's get back to the main topic of today's programme, underlining it all, this conference that starts now in 13 minutes' time in this conference centre behind me here. One of the main speakers, in fact, the opening speaker for that, will be Ersin Özince, who is the head of TÜZAID, which is the main business organisation here, and himself is the CEO of İşbank. Good morning.
Good morning.
Your economy is on its knees. Why should I care about Turkey?
Turkey has always been a faithful partner of the liberal world. It is perhaps the most senior emerging market. So its nature, its dynamics, its potential is huge. It's a big market. And I have to simply say that positives are much more than negatives.
And I think we wish you well in that, sir. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. That's Ersin Özince, who runs the İşbank and is the head of TÜZAID, which is the main industrial organisation here in Turkey. Let's get the latest international news this Friday morning. Charles Amponsah is on the case over in London. Charlie.
Many thanks, Simon. Good morning. A man's been arrested in Japan after stabbing 6 children to death at their school. In total, 29 children and teachers were attacked in Osaka. Police say the man they've arrested is 37 years old and is reported to have taken tranquilizers before the attack. The victims are all said to have been stabbed with a kitchen knife. That's the way the world news looks. Back out to you, Simon, in Istanbul.
Thank you very much. Charles Amponsah over in London with the latest international news. That's more or less it for today's Business Europe for another week. We are, of course, live in Istanbul, the conference about to start here. 2,000 delegates from around the world discussing the situation in which Turkey finds itself. You should remember that Turkey is a long-standing member of NATO. It is regarded as really the gateway to the East. It is where, on Monday, when Iraq stopped pumping oil, we learnt that through Turkey. They said it's not coming through our pipeline to the West. Similarly, of course, it is a country that is very close to the former republics of the Soviet bloc. For that, it's no wonder that the IMF has bailed out Turkey for the 3rd time in 17 months. It has some very influential friends around the world. Merrill Lynch recommends buying Turkish debt. JP Morgan says sit tight. Your decision on entering Turkey's volatile markets will probably be based on a political evaluation. Can Kemal Dervis, the 52-year-old World Bank veteran who's now the economy minister, defeat that snake pit of cronyism? Meanwhile, our top story in the United Kingdom. Tony Blair has won a 2nd term of office for the 2nd time only in the history of UK politics. The left has won again. Thank you for watching today's Business Europe. Stay tuned, of course, to Squawk Box, which follows from the team over here in Istanbul. Good morning.
In business, time is money. Second by second, markets open, money moves, stories break. Every second counts. If you can't access CNBC 24 hours a day, you're missing out.
DAX has kicked off weaker.
Small rise in the oil stocks this morning.
Costs in the 4th quarter were also extremely high.
I am standing between 2 big situations on Wall Street. The excitement is getting even louder right now.
People will hold a stock for 30 seconds if they can make some money.
CNBC, the only network with live coverage of the European, US and Asian markets. A unique mix of specialist advice from respected analysts and industry professionals. Exclusive, real-time, volume-driven ticker. This is not something you watch, this is something you use. To get connected to CNBC 24 hours a day, at home and in the office, contact Business TV at cnbceurope.com.
Coming up in Market Watch, independent day trader Alan Rich tells us more about Nasdaq Level 2 trading. And Angela Knight, chairman of Amponsah, gives us her view on the outcome of the UK election. So make sure you join us tomorrow at 10 CET.